What is good, everybody? Aversile back with, I believe, the seventh video in the scripting series. Now, in the video, if you notice that my voice sounds a little nasally, it's because unfortunately, I caught a particular illness that has been well known for the past few years. I'm assuming you can guess what illness that is. Um, but I don't want to talk about that because I can risk getting demonetized. But either way, I just wanted to let you know, just because if you're like, what's wrong with this guy's voice today? That's why. But either way, what's up, guys? Hope your day's going well. Hope your evening's going well. So you probably want to know, what are we talking about today? So today we're going to be talking about loops, and loops are very important because they basically allow us to run a specific block of code as many times as we specify. So I think we're going to talk about two types of loops for today. These are the loops I want to go over for today. So, oh, and they're called while loops and for loops. And those two are different kinds of loops, but they do essentially the same thing in the sense that they repeat a line of code a certain amount of times. But the difference is that one only runs under a certain condition, whereas the other runs a set amount of times that you make it run. And I'll get into all of that. And then also, we're going to talk about some basic data types. So I have told you somewhat what data types are. You know that a number is a data type. You know that a string is a data type. You know that a Boolean is a data type. A function is a data type. But I'm going to explicitly define for you what a data type is, and we're going to talk about a special function made by Roblox that can tell us the data type of, let's say, a variable or something we write in our code, for instance, or something in our workspace or in any of our services here. I'll only briefly talk about that because a data type will become a lot clearer to you when you get some more experience with coding. But I just want to briefly understand it just so you get it kind of floating around in your head for a later video. Once again, this is a beginner's series. I don't expect that you to be a pro at everything I'm talking about just yet. But either way, let's dive right into it. So let's talk about loops. Let's go and let's just insert a script. Let's erase this print statement, this print function, and I'm actually going to prove to you that print is a function, but it should be clear to you that it is a function because of the open closing parentheses. That's the syntax for a function. But this is a special function because Roblox has already defined what this does for us. All we have to do is call it, and it handles everything for us. So we don't have to define print because it's already defined for us by Roblox. But either way, enough talk. So there are two types of loops I want to talk about: while loops and for loops. And let's talk about the syntax. So the first one, now, when I write this, please do not run your game. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you why not to run your game here in a second, but let's write while true do enter. So this is the first type of loop. The next one is for I equals 1, 5, let's say. Sorry about my voice once again. I'm sorry if I'm a little quiet in this episode. I can't really speak that well, but oh, also sorry, don't worry about that. I was just testing something. You'll learn what that means here in a bit. Oh, and also sorry for this. I was just testing stuff. But basically, let's talk about this first loop, okay? So remember, a block of code. So all of this loop, which you don't really know what is yet, I'm going to define it for you, whatever's in here is going to be what's going to run when a condition is true. So what do you mean? Okay, so let's define a variable, and let's say local x equals 1, for instance. And let's say while x is less than 5, we're going to run this repeatedly. And we're going to say print x. this is actually going to run forever because x is not changing. So let's do something. Let's say x is equal to x plus 1. So every time this iterates, which means every time it goes over this block of code, and remember, it's a loop. So as long as this condition is true, this block of code will just keep running over and over again. And I should specifically mention that it runs extremely fast. And that is why I said not to run your game unless I say so. Or at least until you learn what just running a while loop does. Because it can crash your game. Because the code is running so fast that your computer just can't keep up with it. So we define a variable. While this condition is true, we're going to do x is equal to x plus 1. So we're going to first thing we're going to do is we're going to set x equal to itself plus 1. So x is going to increase. Then we're going to print x. Well, actually, let's go ahead and print x first, just so we don't get x equals 2 as our first argument, or as our first print statement. So while x is less than 5, do print x. So first thing it's going to print is 1. Then it's going to increase it by 1. Then x is going to be 2, but x is still not greater than or equal to 5, because essentially what x is less than 5 means is, well, if it's more than 5, if it's equal to or more than 5, this is not going to run. So what's going to happen is we're going to go x equals 1. Okay, let's do this code. Okay, we're in a loop, so x is plus equal to 1. It's going to be equal to itself plus 1, so it's going to be 2. But this condition is still true, so it's going to keep going until it hits 4. Then it's going to go one more time, but then we're going to get back to the top, and it's going to say, wait, x is 5, which means this condition's not true. So how many times do you think this while loop is going to print x until it stops printing x? Well, let's see. Let's run. Let's see what it prints. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're probably wondering, why doesn't it print 5? Well, let me explain. So let's go to when it enters the while loop. Okay, so it prints 1, then x is plus equal to 1. So it adds 1 to x, and now it's 2. We're going to print 2. We're going to add 1. Print 3, add 1. Print 4, add 1. But once it prints 4 and adds 1, now it's 5. So is this condition true anymore? No, it's not. So the reason it doesn't run on 5 is because as soon as it turns to 5 and it goes back up to the top, x is 5 now. So this isn't going to run. But if we said less than or equal to 5, then we'd get 5. And then it wouldn't do it anymore after that, because then it'd be greater than 5. It has to be less than or equal to 5. So in a very basic sense, a while loop is a type of loop that constantly executes the same block of code from top to bottom over and over again until a condition is no longer met. And the condition is this. It can be whatever you want, as long as the condition returns true. And if you don't know what I mean by that, just think of it. Well, is x less than or equal to 5? If that's true, then it should just make sense that it would return true. If it's not less than or equal to 5, then it would just return false. Intuitively, that's all I really need you to think of it as for now. Understand that a condition returns true or false. And all that really means is this statement true? And at what times? And at what times is it not true? And in that case, we're not going to do this anymore. Now, do not use this while loop. Like if you're following along and writing this down, do not do anything. We're going to come back and I'm going to define a very special function made by Roblox that can delay our code from running for a certain set period of time. So I'm gonna have like an applications part of our video for loops specifically because they're very useful. Developers use them on the daily, but we're gonna do that in the applications part of the video. This is just the theory, and in the applications, I'm gonna introduce two keywords called continue and break. And also task.wait, which is the function I mentioned that basically delays your code from running for a certain period of time. So that, remember how I said while loops run very fast and it can crash your computer? Well, task.wait is actually going to prevent that code from running super fast. And we're going to get into that later. But for now, let's just talk briefly about what a for loop is. So, a for loop gives you a temporary variable and it sets it equal to an initial value, a final value, and there's a hidden third value which gives you the increment. So 2, let's say. Well, me personally, I never use this increment. I've never found myself using increments. But basically that means, okay, let me show you here. So we're gonna get rid of all this stuff. So let's just print I. Remember how I said this is a temporary variable? This is a special variable only defined for the for loop. And I just means the number that we're on. So what's going to happen, let me get rid of this so it becomes more easier for now. I is going to start at 1. Then over the next iteration or next running of whatever's in the block of code, it's going to be I plus 1, then I plus 2, then I plus 3. So the first thing it's going to print is 1. Then it's going to print 2. Then it's going to print 3. Because by default, it increments by 1. But if you add, let's say, 2, then it's going to print 1. Then it's going to print 3. Then it's going to print 5. So let me do this without the increment first. So let's just run. And it goes from 1 to 5. And 1 is the initial value, and 5 is the final value. Now let's say increment by 2. So it's going to go 1, 3, 5. That just means how much we're increasing I by whenever we do an iteration. So run, and we get 1, 3, 5. Now let's say we do an iteration over a number that we can't reach. So 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. So will this print 5? Well, no, because that's impossible. So it's only going to print 1 and 4. It is not going to print 5 or 3, 4, 7. It's not going to print 7 because the max value is 5. But either way, that's enough for increments. I don't use increments. If you've heard anyone that does or why it might be useful, let me know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I never personally use increments. But yeah, you notice how I can put I as a variable into our print statement because you can use this variable anywhere. So it's really useful, and we'll see that it's actually particularly useful in what's called a table. But we're going to talk about tables in another episode. Now, one thing I do not recommend that you do is try to, remember how I said I is a variable? I don't recommend you ever try to change the value of I, because 1, that's not particularly useful, but 2, it might mess up your code. So do not attempt to change the value of I in your block here. All right, so now let's talk about applications. So let's go back to our while loop. So while true do. And remember how I said, as long as this condition is true, this is just going to keep running over and over again. So let's say I had a part, and let's just say we have this part here. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so let's say I wanted the loop to change my brick color of this part to a random brick color every second. All right, so let's go to our script. Let's say while true do, and now I'm going to introduce this function. So I'm going to introduce briefly something called a library. So a library is just a set of special functions made by Roblox, of course. And that's all I'm really going to explain them as for now. I'm in a specific video, I'm going to talk about all the libraries. But for now, just think of it like it's just a set of special functions that do specific things with your code. And one of the libraries I'm going to talk about today is called task. And you see it'll actually pop up here, task. Now, don't worry about what that means. I'm going to talk about the task scheduler in another video as well. It's going to be far in the future though. But for now, let's do dot. So the reason we use dot is because task is the library name. Now we're going to go into the library and say the specific function we want to use. And in this case, we want to do wait. Now, don't worry about any of this gibberish. I'm going to talk about all this crap in a much later video. Once again, this stuff is too complicated. So all you should really know is just to memorize, for now, just the syntax. So task, which is the library, and then wait, which is the specific function that we want to use. Now, what goes into this for an argument? Okay, first it takes in one argument. So what is the argument? Well, it's in seconds. So you can see duration, number, right? In seconds, the amount of time you want to delay the code from running. For now, I'll explain it like that. So if I said 2 seconds, it's gonna go into this loop, and it's gonna say, okay, we gotta wait 2 seconds before we go below. So it's gonna wait 2 seconds, and then it says, okay, we waited, so let's go run this code again. Okay, let's go back up. Oh, we gotta wait 2 seconds again. Okay, let's run this after 2 seconds. So that's basically what it does. So let's say workspace dot part dot brick color equals brick color dot random. So here's what this is going to do. Okay, we have a while loop. So when this is true, that means the condition is always going to be true. So when it comes to loops like this, when we don't have an actual condition, but it's always set to true, we have to use something called break. And break is basically going to force us to get out of the while loop once a certain condition is met, generally speaking. But you can also just do break like that. And what that does, it's going to say, okay, let's go into this and let's do task.wait 2. So we're going to wait 2 seconds. We're going to change the brick color of this part. Then we're just going to break, which means we don't want to use this while loop anymore. Without break, let me just do this before we introduce break. So let's run. And you'll see that every 2 seconds, 1, 2, 1, 2. Maybe I'm not the best at counting, but it's about 2 seconds. It's 2 seconds. And you see that it changes it to a random brick color every time. So now let's say if it's a specific brick color, I want it to stop. So let's say if workspace.part.brick color is equal to brick color, equal to brick color dot new medium stone gray. There. Then we're gonna break, which means, okay, so this is always true, which means this while loop is always gonna run because there isn't really a condition, and the condition is always true, which means this while loop is always gonna run unless we break out of the while loop. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start from the top. Task.wait 2, so we're gonna wait 2 seconds. Then we're going to run all this code beneath it. Okay, so we're going to change the parts brick color to a random brick color every iteration. Then we're going to go down and we're going to check this if condition. Sorry, this conditional statement. So if the parts brick color is equal to a specific brick color, which we said was medium stone gray, then we're going to break out of this while loop. Now you might ask, well, wouldn't this be way too small of a time? Well, yeah, it is. So let's do 0.1. And you'll see that the brick color is going to change much faster. But remember, when the brick color is equal to this brick color, the while loop is not going to run anymore. So let's see if it does what we say. Boom. As soon as it turned medium stone gray, it broke. Let's do it again. That was pretty quick, by the way. Boom. We check medium stone gray. So it broke out of the loop. You notice how it just kept running over and over and over again. But as soon as this condition was met, we did break, which means the while loop is not going to run anymore. So specifically where your while loop doesn't have a specific condition that needs to be met, you're often going to use break to get out of it. So like let's say you only want the while loop at a specific time, then you can use break. But another way we could do it is, well, why if this is the condition here, couldn't we just replace this conditional statement and put the condition up here? And that's true. You can do that. So let's go ahead and run. Or sorry, I apologize. So I was confused for a second, but basically this while loop did not run initially because my brick color was already equal to medium stone gray. So I set it to medium stone gray, and this while loop is only gonna run ever if this part's brick color is not equal to medium stone gray. So the fact that my part was medium stone gray before I even went into the loop made it so that the while loop never ran to begin with. But when I started, I automatically changed the brick color first thing. So you gotta pay attention to that. My bad. All right, guys. So let's talk about continue. Continue is not usable in while loops, but they are usable in for loops. There's another type of loop called repeat until, but I don't think I've ever used a repeat loop. But if you still want to learn about it, it's called a repeat until loop, and it's fairly easy to pick up. Take you a couple minutes, but I'm gonna go over the two that have been most useful to me, and they do pretty much everything you need. So I've never found an instance where I had to use a repeat loop. So yeah, but either way, so let me give you an example of how to use continue. So we're going to define a variable where you say local. Actually, no, we don't need it because we're using a for loop. So we already have a variable, which is I. We're just going to go from I from 1 to 5 with a 1 increment because the default increment is 1. But once again, if you want to change it, you just add another comma and then you put whatever increment you want to do. So the next iteration, 1 is going to increase, which is our starting value, where it is going to increase by whatever your increment number is. So the next iteration, it would be 7. Either way, we're going to stick with 1. Once again, that's another thing I've never found myself doing is using the increment. But either way, so let's say if I equal to 3, then we're going to continue. But if it isn't that, well, we're going to print I. Now, what do you think this is going to do? Well, let's run the game. So, what's going to happen? Is it going to print 1 to 5? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 4, 5. It prints everything but 3. And you notice in that conditional statement we said if I is equal to 3, then we're going to continue. Now, continue is a special word that basically tells our for loop to just don't do anything below this if statement. We're gonna go back up and we're just gonna skip I equals 3, which is the third iteration. So we're just gonna skip everything that happens in the third iteration of this loop. So we're not gonna print I when I is equal to 3. That's what continue does. I have used continue a few times. I've definitely found points where I needed it. So this is a good one to remember. But honestly, break is a lot more important. But continue also has its purpose, of course, depending on what you're doing. So I think the last thing I wanted to talk about was what a data type is. And in a basic sense, a data type is the specific type of language that you can use in code. For instance, a function is a data type. A variable is not a data type because a variable's data type is just the data type of the thing that it's equal to. So if I said local number equals 5, this variable would just be a number data type. So now let's see how to check the data type of something. So let's say I have a local number, and also I'm going to define it as a num, just so you can see what I mean here. So let's say it's equal to 254. I don't know. So we're going to use a special function called typeof. And typeof allows us to put in a variable or just something we want to check the data type of. So in this case, we want to check the data type of a variable called num. And it's going to print it out. Well, actually, sorry, we do have to print it out here. Whoopsie. So we're going to print out the type of num. Let's run. It's a number. So that is the data type of this variable. So for instance, if I did text and I did Bob, I don't know, I just, hey man, Bob is just someone I can fall back on, guys, okay? You know, having a tough day, my boy Bob is always there for me, man. I don't know, it's just the first thing that pops in my head. Anyways, type of text, and it returns a string. So we talked about strings. That is a string. That is the data type. So a string is also a data type. And you get the process. So if we did text is equal to a boolean, um, you can try this out yourself. It'll return a boolean. A boolean is a data type. If you set my func, and then we did function. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. You can actually store a function into a variable. I never do this, but instead of naming the function, you just put the name of the function in the variable itself. And you also don't have to do local function because the variable is local. And then we could do whatever is in there, and then we can just print the data type that corresponds to this variable. And you could probably guess we're going to get a function. Now, there are so many more data types that I have not talked about, but that's for much later videos. For now, I just want to briefly introduce you to data types because, you know, by now you've learned a little bit. So now, you know, you're at that level where I can kind of get it into your head a little bit, you know, what a data type is. You know, you guys are good enough now where I can start actually introducing some of the theory. Now, if you're wondering if a while loop or a for loop is a data type, no, they are not. They're like if statements. They are called control structures. And they are not, for now, I just want you to think of it as they are not the data themselves, but they control how the data in your code flows, runs, does whatever it does. That's all they are. They're not data types, they're control structures. And you can actually, I'll link some stuff in the description because now you're at the level where I can actually start linking more advanced stuff to you if you want to learn what exactly data types and all that stuff are. Because by now you are at that level where you can start picking up theory. Don't go too far because there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't get. And I'm going to introduce that stuff slowly. But we're going to take our time with this. I'll give you links that I think you would be ready for. Yeah, but either way, that about does it for this video. Hope it was helpful. But until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace.